In 1903, a Chinese laundryman on Sacramento Street earned $8 a week. He pressed shirts for men who would not share a sidewalk with him. He could not own property. He could not become a citizen. He could not send for his wife. Within 15 years, he owned 3 laundries outright. No debt, $400 in savings. His neighbors assumed connections. He had none. He had a system. Rules so old and so deliberately enforced, his children thought them ordinary. They were not ordinary. They were the reason his family escaped the laundry in a single generation. Most of those rules have since been forgotten. They built wealth in a country that passed a law to keep them out. They saved in a system that refused them accounts. They started businesses in neighborhoods that barred them from buying property. Not with luck, not with connections, not with any pathway open to everyone else. With habits. Disciplines so quiet and so invisible the families who practiced them were mistaken for exceptional. They were not exceptional. They were careful. That carefulness built fortunes that outlasted every law designed to erase them. We buried that knowledge the moment prosperity returned. What had once kept families alive vanished into convenience. We called the trade progress. Number 17 on this list moved over $100 in value every week, without a single dollar ever changing hands. Number 9 funded more immigrant businesses in America than any government loan program of the 20th century, and it happened at wedding tables. And number 3, the rule these families enforced more fiercely than any other is the same principle now printed in every personal finance book ever written. They practiced it in 1910. No book, no advisor, just discipline. These 25 tricks were not secrets because they were shameful. They were secrets because the people who used them understood something the rest of America had not yet learned. Wealth is not built in the open. It is built in the quiet. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 secret money tricks Chinese immigrants used to build wealth while everyone else stayed poor. Number 25. The Hui, the bank that no bank knew existed. When a Chinese immigrant needed capital in 1910, he did not approach a bank. The bank refused him. He went to his Hui, a rotating saving circle of 10 to 20 trusted men, same village, same dialect. Each contributed a fixed amount monthly. One man took the entire pot each month. Turns came around to everyone. No interest, no collateral, no application. When his turn came, he held $200 in hand. 25 weeks of wages appearing at once. The Hui crossed the Pacific in railroad workers' pockets before the transcontinental line was finished. It predated every American bank that ever refused them membership. It was not charity, it was architecture. Number 24, the family wage pool, the paycheck that belonged to no single person. In a Chinese immigrant household, income did not belong to the earner. It belonged to the family. Every working member brought their wages to the table. A family of 5 might pool $22 a week, assembled from a son in a restaurant, a daughter taking in alterations, a father at the press. No single member spent freely. The family's need determined where every dollar moved. Individually, each of them was poor. Together, they were solvent. In Chinatown, neighborhoods from San Francisco to New York, wage pooling was so standard it was never discussed, assumed the way weather is assumed. The pool was not about control. It was about multiplication. Number 23, the zero-waste kitchen, the meal that cost nothing because nothing was discarded. The whole fish went into one pot. Bones became broth. Broth became the base for 3 more meals. Leftover rice became congee. Leftover congee became a fried cake. Nothing was wasted. Everything was tomorrow's ingredient. A family of 5 ate on $1.50 a week. American neighbors spent $4 feeding the same number and threw away more than a Chinese household ever purchased. That $2.50 gap added up to $130 a year, recovered silently from the way the food was handled. Guangdong village mothers had practiced this for generations before the first ship reached California. The knowledge crossed the ocean intact. The bones were not garbage. They were the next meal waiting to become itself. Number 22. The Night School Rule. 22. The Night School Rule. The Night School Rule. The 50-cent investment that paid back everything. No matter how long the workday ran, the children went to school. American school by day, Chinese school in the evening. Language, arithmetic, 2 more hours of drilled discipline, 50 cents a week in tuition. Parents were still at work when the session ended. The schedule had been set before they left. Education was the only door still open when every other door was erased. A man barred from owning property could still own knowledge. By 1920, children of Chinese immigrants in San Francisco held literacy rates rivaling any community in the city. Their parents had arrived speaking no English. The tuition was the last bill questioned. It was the only one with a guaranteed return. Number 21. The Laundry Ledger. The notebook that turned $8 a week into a business. Every laundryman kept a ledger, not a rough count, a precise daily record. Every shirt taken in, every cent collected and spent. Written in Chinese, in shorthand only the owner could read. It tracked not just revenue, but patterns. Which days ran heavy, which customers paid late, which expenses crept upward. From the ledger came every decision: when to raise a price, when to open a second location, when to wait. In New York's early Chinatown, laundry operators were so meticulous that local merchants brought them in to audit accounts no one else could untangle. He could not open a checking account. He could balance one better than any man in the building. Number 20. The no credit rule. The discipline that looked like poverty and built like patience. You did not buy what you could not pay in full. Not a coat, not furniture, not an expansion. A furniture set bought on installment in 1920 cost an extra $3 in interest over 1 year, nearly half a week's wages, for an item a cash buyer owned outright. The no-credit family kept the furniture and the $3. Year after year, the compounding ran in their favor instead of the lenders. When banks opened their doors to Chinese borrowers, these families did not rush in. They had been raised by people who had never needed to borrow. The credit line was always available. They never used it. That was the point. Number 19. The two-job standard. The income that was always larger than it appeared. One job paid the bills. The second built the savings. Not as a response to crisis, but as the plan from the beginning. A laundryman pressed shirts 6 days a week. Sunday morning, a vegetable cart brought in $3 to $5 extra. Never announced. Invisible to any landlord calculating next month's rent increase. The second income was always smaller. It was nearly impossible to lose at the same moment as the first. Chinese immigrant social histories on both coasts record this pattern without exception. One job for today, one job for tomorrow. He worked 2 jobs so that his son would only ever need one. Number 18. The backroom business. The second economy hidden inside the first. The laundry was the front. Behind the curtain, something else entirely. A small grocery operation. A letter-writing service for men who could not read English. A lending arrangement. Whatever the neighborhood needed and nobody else provided, the back room quietly provided. An extra $4 to $6 each week, invisible to anyone who might have taxed or regulated it. You did not advertise the back room. You let the right people find it. Historians examining early Chinatown records found that backroom economies in some blocks generated more annual revenue than all the visible storefronts combined. The sign said laundry. The ledger said otherwise. Here is what the history books do not emphasize. In 1882, the United States passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, the only law in American history written to name a single nationality and bar it from citizenship. For 61 years, Chinese immigrants could not become Americans, could not own land in California, could not vote, could not bring their wives, could not access the same courts, banks, or contracts every other family took for granted. They built their financial systems not beside the American economy, entirely around it. The HUE existed because the bank refused them. The wage pool existed because one income could vanish with a single new law. These were not workarounds. They were the only doors available. The families who walked through them built something the law was specifically designed to prevent. Number 17. The trade network, the $100 economy that never touched a wallet. Within a Chinatown community, favors circulated the way money does in other economies. A butcher gave the best cuts to families whose sons helped with deliveries. A seamstress altered the grocer's wife's clothing at no charge. The grocer extended credit through a hard winter. Not $1 changed hands. Historians estimate a single block moved $80 to $120 in goods and labor weekly. When cash ran low, the network held. You did not go hungry. You went to the person who owed you a favor from 3 months prior. This reciprocal economy crossed the Pacific from village culture. It was 1,000 years old before it reached California. The economy had no ledger. It kept its own accounts. Number 16. The property first rule. Land before anything that could be repossessed. When laws changed and a Chinese immigrant family could legally purchase property, they did not celebrate with furniture. They bought land. A commercial lot in Sacramento sold for $200 in 1920. Plain, unimproved. They paid cash and improved it slowly, over years. They had watched American families furnish houses they did not own. Appearance could be repossessed. Foundation could not. After the alien land laws fell, Chinese immigrant families entered the property market carrying savings built through decades of forced exclusion. Within one generation, they were among the most property-wealthy communities in cities that had once barred them. He could not buy land for 30 years. When he could, he already knew which block. Number 15. The remittance discipline, the obligation that built the budget. Every month, a fixed amount went back to the village, to a mother, to cousins who had not yet crossed. Not optional, the first line out of every paycheck, before rent, before groceries. You lived on what remained after the obligation was met. And yet, the families who sent money home most faithfully were never the ones who saved the least. The obligation forced a structure. Structure forced a margin. In 1900, Chinese immigrants sent an estimated $7 million a year back to China, over $230 million in today's terms, on wages most economists would not have called survivable. He owed the village. The village made sure he also owed himself. Number 14. The gift economy, the startup fund disguised as a celebration. When a son married, the red envelopes guests brought were not gifts in the Western sense. They were investment rounds. A modest Chinatown wedding in the 1930s generated $300 to $500 in envelope money, enough to lease a restaurant space, enough to buy a commercial laundry machine. The community understood money given at one wedding funded the next business, When that business succeeded, the owner gave generously at the next wedding. No contracts, no applications, self-sustaining. Scholars of Chinese immigrant economic history have called the red envelope system a venture capital mechanism operating a full century before anyone coined that term. The community did not loan the money, it invested it. Number 13. The name loan. The credit backed by nothing but a reputation worth keeping. A man with no collateral and no credit history could borrow within his community on his name alone. Loans of $50 to $200, backed by standing and by a record of keeping his word, with no document, no signature, no bank. If he defaulted, he did not just lose money, he lost trust, standing, and access to every future favor the network might ever extend. The punishment was permanent. Default rates within Chinese immigrant lending circles were extraordinarily low. This system had functioned in Guangdong villages for centuries before the first ship reached California. He had no credit. He had something worth more. He had a name he could not afford to damage. Number 12. The second-hand first rule. The new thing was never bought new. Before any major purchase, the used version was located first. A new sewing machine cost $40 in 1915. A used one in good repair cost $12. Both sewed the same seam. The $28 gap moved into savings, the HUI contribution or the education envelope, not into a retailer's margin. Applied to every major purchase across 10 years, this one habit saved the equivalent of a full year's wages. This was not from extra income, it came from the gap between the asking price and the honest one. In Chinatown neighborhoods, informal second-hand markets ran in basements and back alleys. Equipment passed from business to business as families upgraded. Nothing was abandoned. Everything was priced. Number 11. The long game. The investment no one expected to see returned in their lifetime. A Chinese immigrant family in 1920 did not save for retirement. They saved for the next generation's starting position. $2 a week, set aside without interruption, accumulated to more than $2,000 over 20 years, more than 2 full years of wages compounded into tuition, property, and a head start no single lifetime of labor could produce. This reframing changed every financial decision. A sacrifice unbearable over one life looked reasonable over 2. Research into Chinese-American intergenerational wealth consistently found the highest rates of upward mobility in families with multigenerational savings habits beginning in the immigration generation. He did not plant the tree for himself. He planted knowing he would never sit in its shade. Number 10. The invisible pantry. The stockpile built before prices could rise. When rice dropped to 4 cents a pound, you bought a 100-pound sack. When oil was cheap, you bought in quantity. The pantry was built in abundance, so the household survived scarcity without paying scarcity prices. A family buying at 4 cents did not pay 7 cents when prices rose. A 3-cent gap across 100 pounds was $3 saved without a single extra hour of work. This was not hoarding, it was arithmetic. The practice came from southern Chinese village culture, where monsoon seasons made surplus storage a survival discipline long before America existed. The price on the shelf was always the wrong price to pay. In 2003, economists at UCLA compared household savings rates across immigrant communities in California. Chinese immigrant households at all income levels saved at nearly 3 times the national average. Researchers expected higher income to explain the gap. It did not. At equivalent incomes, the gap held. The difference was behavioral, not financial. The HUI, the family wage pool, the no-credit rule, the two-job standard, habits formed under legal exclusion and maintained long after the exclusion ended. These families did not save more because they had more. They saved more because they had been built to behave as if everything could vanish tomorrow. That behavior produced wealth more reliably than any other single factor the economists could measure. Number 9. The celebration tax. 9. The celebration tax. The skim from every moment of joy. At every celebration, a wedding, a new year, a child's first birthday, a fixed portion of incoming gift money was set aside before a dollar of it touched the event. A Chinatown wedding generated $300 to $500 in red envelope gifts. 10% came off the top first. $30 to $50 moved into savings before the first dish was served. Joy was not exempt from the budget. A moment of unusual cash flow was a moment to capture it. Chinese New Year functioned as both cultural obligation and annual financial reset, a moment to strengthen Huey contributions and set the savings target. Every celebration contained a deposit. That was the agreement. Number 8. The Children's Education Fund. The account opened before the child could walk. From the moment a child was born, a dedicated reserve began accumulating for their education. 25 cents a week, $13 a year, small, deliberate, untouchable, not borrowed against for any other purpose. Emergencies had their own envelope. This fund had one purpose and one terminus: the day the child no longer needed it. For families barred from passing wealth through property, a funded mind was the one form of dignity the exclusion could not reach. By the 1940s, children of Chinese immigrants were entering American universities at rates that astonished institutions that had tried to exclude them. The fund was not a gift. It was an obligation accepted before the child had any say. 7. The one-generation rule. Number 7. The one-generation rule. The deliberate sacrifice with a fixed deadline. The immigration generation agreed, without words, to live below what they could afford for exactly one generation. On $8 a week, a family that held spending to $5 created $3 in weekly savings. Over 10 years, $1,560 became the foundation of a property purchase. Every dollar of comfort withheld compounded into the next generation's starting position. The sacrifice had a terminus. When the children were established, it was finished. Most of this generation never stopped anyway. Oral histories from Chinese-American families in the 1970s found that parents, discovered at death, had accumulated far more than anyone had suspected. He did not want comfort. He wanted his son to start somewhere he never could. Number 6. The silent partner. The business interest never announced. When one man in the network opened a business, others quietly invested, not with paperwork, not with stakes that appeared anywhere official. A private agreement honored completely without reminders. A 10% share in a laundry earning $500 a year returned $50 annually in invisible income. Multiply that across 3 arrangements, and a man appearing to run one laundry could be quietly earning like a businessman. In an era of active licensing discrimination, keeping ownership silent was not evasion. It was survival. Historians examining Chinatown business records have found apparent sole proprietorships were often networks of silent investors operating under a single public name. He owned stakes in 6 businesses. Not one bore his name. Number 5. The discipline of silence. The wealth that was never discussed. A Chinese immigrant family that had built savings did not speak of it, not to neighbors, not to relatives outside the household. A family known to have $200 saved was a family that could be pressured for loans that would never be repaid. A family whose finances were invisible had none of those problems. The silence extended outward. A thriving business did not advertise. An appreciated property was not mentioned at dinner. American-born children often learned their family's true financial position only at death. The culture of silence ran so deep it looked from outside like modesty. It was not modesty. It was protection, wired into the household from the first generation forward. Number 4. The two-price menu. The number you negotiated versus the number on the sign. The price on the sign was for people who did not know better. The real price emerged after a relationship with the seller was established. In Chinatown wholesale markets, vendors built the negotiation into their asking price. Everyone understood this. A family extracting 10 to 15% below asking on recurring purchases saved $20 to $30 a year on staples alone. Compounded across food, equipment, and supplies, the annual gap equaled nearly a month's wages, and it was recovered with no additional labor. The families who extracted the real price consistently were those who shopped the same vendors for years without interruption. The number on the sign was an opening. The real number took longer to reach. Number 3. The emergency envelope. The fund committed before the emergency arrived, before rent, before groceries, before the remittance. $1 a week went into an emergency fund, sealed against anything but a genuine emergency. $1 a week was $52 a year. More than a full week's wages held in reserve against a day nobody could predict. The discipline was in the definition. If everything qualified as an emergency, nothing was protected. These families defined it narrowly and enforced it without debate. Depression-era Chinese immigrant households with emergency reserves recovered from job loss at twice the rate of comparable families that had not built one. The envelope was sealed. The seal was the whole point. Number 2. The cost of face. The one place they spent deliberately on appearance. Me&Z, face, was real currency. Reputation, standing, the respect of the network that sustained everything else. They maintained it not with luxury, but with precision. A $3 red envelope at a wedding maintained a relationship worth $500 a year in referrals and favors. A dignified suit for a business meeting, a quality gift for the right host. These were not impulse purchases. They were calculated investments in the independence the network provided. Spend too little and you lost standing. Spend too much and you lost savings. The families who held the exact threshold maintained both. They did not spend on looking wealthy. They spent on being trusted. The difference built everything. Number 1. Pay yourself first. Before the Hui contribution. Before the remittance. Before the rent. The first thing that happened when money arrived, a fixed amount was set aside. Not what felt comfortable, not what was left over. An amount decided in advance, moved before any other claim could reach it. 50 cents, $1, whatever the week allowed. Always first. 50 cents a week was $26 a year, more than 3 days of wages, built invisibly while the rest of the household ran as normal. This was the rule these families guarded more fiercely than any other. Not because the amount was large, because the order was everything. Not what you earn, what you keep before the world can reach it. None of this required wealth to begin. None of it required permission from any institution that had spent a century refusing to grant it. What it required was habits, consistent, enforced, passed down without sentimentality at kitchen tables where no outsider was watching. The Chinese immigrants who built fortunes on $8 a week in laundry wages did not have advantages. They had disciplines, a hui instead of a bank, A ledger instead of a credit score. A silence around their finances so complete the wealth they built was invisible until it was undeniable. We replaced all of it, with credit that arrives pre-approved, with advice sold by institutions that profit from our impatience. The laundryman on Sacramento Street needed none of it. A coffee can, a circle of men who kept their word, the discipline to pay himself before anyone else could make a claim. The amount he started with was almost nothing. He built from it anyway, a set of rules, practiced without interruption, passed down without ceremony, more effective than anything the country that excluded them ever bothered to teach.